Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Test of the Month Club. I'm Nick Ellinger, MOR's Chief Brand Officer. And today we have a couple of tests talking about text. And we're going to look at text a couple of different ways. First one is text messaging, just a bit of background, looking at the recent M+R Benchmarks report, which I highly recommend. A lot of good data points in there. Text message audiences are growing significantly, far more than Facebook, and email lists actually shrunk a little bit last year. And there's generally better metrics than emails. So about 8 times the click-through rate for fundraising messages and about 3 times the click-through rate for advocacy messages. That's the good news. Bad news is that text messaging lists tend to be very small. The volume of text messages going out even per person is increasing, so there's a little bit more noise in the market, although I don't think we've reached saturation point by any means. But the metrics are falling, as happens when you have an increase in messages and an increase in list size. You have more marginal cases in your text messaging lists. And so what M+R found is consistent decrease in click-through rates, decrease in response rates, often pretty much consistently double digits, and unsubscribe rates shooting up. So like many other of our channels of communication, there is a bit of a treadmill effect in that you have to run faster and faster to stay in the same place. But the overarching question is, does text messaging work? There's stories of success, clearly, but there's not a lot of A/B testing, in large part because our list sizes are small. You're not able to do, okay, let's throw 25,000 who have text messages, who have opted in, but we're not going to text message those folks, versus 25,000 that we do. We just don't have the list size for that. So we hit our text message list with text messages whenever. And going back to a theme from a previous test of the month, we need to figure out, are we improving the silence? Not only are we using text messages and having a boost right now, but does that not take away from other things that you're doing and add to positive value over time? There is an area that has text message lists that are large enough, and that's in the blood donation sphere, because the opt-in rate for that is very high. And so what we're going to be talking about here is, I believe, the first text test, and it took me a lot of practice to be able to say that, with a long-term impact and a control group, looking at 20,000 blood donors. So they randomized, half are going to receive a text message when your donation's used about the impact, the other half did not. And as a blood donor, I may have actually been in this study, so kind of interesting that. They also randomized the time of day that they made this send to see if that had any impact among those who did receive the text message. So this is a bit interesting because it's not a donation ask, it's a gratitude ask. So having that thank you text message, you made this specific impact, does it increase retention rate? So let's take a look. And it does, with some qualifications. So the text message lifted subsequent blood donations in this case by 3.6%. Evening was significantly the best, had a lift of 6.5%. But their difference was only among plasma donors. There was not any significant, nor really any discernible difference for whole blood donors. So let's talk about the difference between plasma and blood donors. Now, it's not just people make or Red Cross makes recommendations as to what you should donate based on what your blood type is. And the upshot of it is that if you are a universal donor, you should give red cells because we can give your blood to anyone. If you're AB, which is more rare, we can't give your blood to everyone, so you should donate plasma so that your blood is more useful. Now, the trick is that that's not always what people do. In fact, it's not often what people do. And so a survey of blood donors in Quebec found some psychological differences between platelet donors and red cell donors. So everyone says, my greatest motivation is my blood can save lives across the board. But plasma donors were more likely to say, helping people is in their nature, it's part of who I am. And there were some other significant differences. Plasma said, we're more likely to agree with, I think there's a strong need for blood products. It gives me a sense of pride. I like to have goals. I receive telephone reminders. All of those significantly more likely on the plasma side. On the whole blood side, people were significantly more likely to say it's a positive thing to do and requires little effort. I think it could help someone I know someday. A blood drive is convenient. I've seen marketing for it. So to tie a bow on this, backing up. Looking at the difference between plasma and whole blood, you can get some sort of psychological differences between these people. Plasma donors think more about their donations. They're more committed to blood donation. They're not contingent on it being convenient. They will do it anyway. Whereas whole blood people, and I'm in this category, I didn't think of myself as having these characteristics, but people who give whole blood are more likely to be convenience-based, want to do when it has little effort, and their donation isn't about, I wanted to go to someone who is in Mississippi, I wanted to help someone like my family or a close friend. So more of a self-based reason for giving, or at least a close in-network reason for giving. So more altruistic on the plasma side, more committed on the plasma side. So text messages are about impact, increase giving among people who care most about their impact, that plasma donation group. And if you can hit them in the evening, so much the better. But it may not be a mechanism for getting those people who don't care as much about their impact to care about their impact. So, an interesting study there. Do we have any questions? None yet. As I want to do, I will take this question break and vamp a little bit by talking about we would love to share your test results, whether you're an agency and you have a client who has an interesting test, or you're an organization that had an interesting test that you'd like to share with folks, whether it was we had significant results, or we ran this test, it was a failure, don't do this, or it's we ran this test, we didn't get any significant results, but we'd like to hear more like it. Someone is asking, can I go back to donation increase results? So messages lifted subsequent donations by 3.6%, more so if it's in the evening. That's across the board, but that's mainly because of the lift in plasma donations. Any other questions? The other thing that I'd like to hear from you is, are there topics on which you would like to hear about tests that others are doing so that I can work to try to source those or look into the literature? So feel free to shout those out. I'm at nellinger@mooredmgroup.com. So that's NELLInger@mooredmgroup.com. And hopefully that was enough time, but feel free to come in with any other questions that you may have. So now we'll talk about a different text. That should be text versus pictures. We're going to have the battle royale between pictures and text. In the pictures column, you see that pictures are prettier, they look more professional, they help you with that branding thing that we all know is bull, and anyone who has a brand name in their title is probably full of it. As Chief Brand Officer, I can definitely attest to that. And they can help set a mood and a tone. And there are some circumstances that we know that having a picture increases response, and having a child in there increases it more. Black and white increases it more. Having someone who's looking at you increases more. Those types of pictures can be really relevant. But when we're talking email newsletter, there's value in it being faster loading. It gets to more email systems, and it works with all of the email systems if it's in a text base. And so this isn't so much the pictures in terms of we have a picture that goes along with the story, but do I put my logo at the top? How do I organize the wrapper? Do I create a button? Those sorts of things. This is particularly relevant as more people are using email systems that don't auto-load images. So what happens when you take the pictures out of an email newsletter. And these are 2 tests from our friends over at Next After. They have a great library that I've talked about before, I'll probably talk about again, of test results from a lot of their clients that they make public to folks that is really helpful to the full industry. So kudos to Next After and the folks that share. In this case, we have the Fund for American Studies. So what you see on the left is their normal e-newsletter. It's about half of it. This was a long email newsletter. And on the right, you see about half of the text email. And if you get out your microscope or jeweler's loupe or something like that, you can see the text in this is identical. What they've done is they've taken out the banners and the picture that goes with it and the share on social and the podcast image and those sorts of things. So it's just straight text with a little bit of bolding on the right. So what did that do for a response? Click rate went up 69% in terms of click rate. And a large part of this was open rate on what you saw on the right was 35% better. Now people aren't opening it because it's a text email. It's probably difficult to see that, although you'll see over on top of the picture email, there's the view this email in your browser, which is a dead giveaway that I'm getting a newsletter and I'm getting an HTML newsletter. So that could have turned some people off. But I'm thinking part of this is deliverability. When you have a text email, spam filters say, oh, that's more likely to be something that someone wants to read because it's more likely to be an email from grandma or what have you. This isn't an email from grandma. You can probably tell from the sender and things like that, but they do give weight to fewer images. So this was actually, I'm showing one newsletter here, but they actually experimented across 2 different newsletters to verify it wasn't a one-off results. And what you're seeing in click rate here is the aggregate across both email tests. So 69% increase in click rate is a really positive boost in interactivity with the newsletter. But does it work to create action? And that's what KUOW up in, I believe, Washington, Oregon, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, I'm seeing here, Puget Sound Public Radio. So up in Washington, public radio station had 2 different emails in a donation ask. So the left one has your top image, your hero image. You have your one day to raise $1 million with your classic thermometer. We know from behavioral science that thermometers that are really close to the end, especially at 75% like this one, tend to increase donation rates. You have your donation now button that's colorful. That's a good best practice. You have the picture of the person. This is everything that someone would tell you to do picture-wise in your newsletter, in your email ask. And then on the right, you have your text-based version. Same text. These are actually the same size. I just had to shrink the picture one down to get it onto the screen here. So what happened here? A 29% conversion rate from your text-based email. And this is interesting because the designed prettier email was 28% better at generating clicks. Significant difference, 100% confidence in that. But it produced fewer donations overall. The email on the right, the text-based email, was actually about 79% better at converting clicks to donations. So fewer clicks, more donations. Also a very significant difference. And so that stripped down version worked better to get donations since that's the outcome that we're looking for. So if you're looking for a break from the normal, throw out your brand guidelines, throw out your 20-something designer, and try putting in a just text-based email versus your prettier, more image-intensive one, and see if it can't increase some response rates for you. Any questions on either test that we've gone through today? again, while we're waiting for questions to come in, would love to be able to share your results. If you would like to present on one of these calls going forward, love to have you. Or if you can share the types of things that you would like to hear about, I can work to customize and get the types of tests you want to see into these webinars so that they're valuable use of time for you and everyone on these calls. Not seeing any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. Again, my email address is nellinger@moredmgroup.com. We will be using this video, and I did remember to start recording this time. We will be using this video on the TNPA YouTube site so that you can review this and share with your colleagues. Thanks very much and have a good day.